Good afternoon, everybody. This is Michael Allen, the city's current planning manager. And I say current planning because we actually have two planning divisions, and so that frequently causes confusion whether or not I am a city employee or a contract employee or an acting employee. I'm the division manager for the current planning division, and I am a city employee. And I look forward to hopefully meeting all of you back in person in the near future here. We're going to transition into the public meeting portion facilitated by the city, including my partners as part of this project on behalf of the city, ESA, our environmental consultant team, and Farron Pierce, the traffic consultant team. And we will be walking you through the public participation component of the EIR process, including the submittal process for providing written comments. Sorry, getting distracted here with looking at my notes. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. But we will provide a brief overview of the project and the overall CEQA process, as well as identifying the major environmental topics evaluated in the draft EIR, and then summarizing the impact findings provided in the draft EIR, which are currently posted on the city's website. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see the instructions on how to submit the comments in the EIR. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to our team from ESA.
That's good. Thanks so much, Michael. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public meeting on the draft EIR. As Michael had stated, our meeting tonight, we are focused on providing the public with information about the project and the CEQA process. We'll be identifying the environmental topics evaluated in the draft EIR and summarizing the impact findings provided in the draft EIR. We'll also discuss instructions on how you can provide and submit your comments on the draft EIR. And as Michael did note, all of the comments that are received tonight will be responded to in writing in the final EIR. So just a little bit of background, the project is made up of 4 parcels from north to south. We've got the northernmost parcel right here in purple that is currently used as off-site parking for the ECF school just north of the project site across Machado Road. We've also got the parking for ECF is going to be incorporated into the project, as the previous meeting stated. The next parcel in yellow contains the United States Post Office and its associated surface parking. The USPS does have plans to leave this location with or without the project. The third parcel here is currently in green, contains the Coco's Bakery and associated surface parking. The fourth southernmost parcel in orange contains the Valvoline instant oil change and associated surface parking. Great. And so as previously stated, the project is going to consist of a total of 230 residential dwelling units, 66,500 square feet of commercial space. It will include commercial space for market, restaurant, retail, office, and the gym. There's also 28,800 square feet of publicly accessible open space. So that's in the Machado Park, the entry courtyard, and the Paseo courtyard. There's also going to be a new proposed signal at the intersection of Janison Avenue and Sepulveda Boulevard, as well as the relocation of 2 of the bus stops on Sepulveda Boulevard. The project will provide 653 vehicular parking spaces and 71 long and 26 short-term bicycle spaces. So the purpose of CEQA review is to inform the decision makers and the public of the project's potential environmental effects, and also to increase the public's understanding of and participation in environmental review process. So the draft EIR, which is currently available for public review, discloses the potential impacts of the project on the environment, as well as identifies ways to avoid and reduce significant environmental effects through mitigation measures or through alternatives to the project. So this slide here presents an overview of the EIR process that's required by CEQA for the city. As you can see in the reddish boxes, there's various opportunities for public input throughout the EIR process. Back in October 6th of 2020, the city held an EIR scoping meeting to solicit comments on the content of the EIR. And upon the close of the NOP circulation period, the technical analyses for the draft EIR commenced. As of May 6, 2021, a notice of completion and availability of the draft EIR was sent out, which started the public review and comment period. This comment period will end on June 21st, 2021. At the close of that period, the city will review all of the comments that are received, and as required by CEQA, will provide responses to the environmental comments raised pertaining to the information in the EIR. The city will then prepare a final EIR that will include the draft EIR, responses to comments on the draft EIR, as well as any needed corrections or additions to the draft EIR. Finally, upon publication of that final EIR, public hearings will commence, which will be another opportunity for public input. Then the city decision makers will consider the information provided in the EIR and whether to certify the EIR prior to determining whether or not to approve the project. After the city makes their final and formal approval during the hearings, should they do so, they will then issue a notice of determination indicating their decision. So here's a list of the topics, environmental topics that were analyzed within the draft EIR based on the initial study that was completed by the city. And each of these topics is evaluated against the thresholds of significance listed in the EIR sections, which present the criteria to identify at what level an impact would be considered significant. The draft EIR analyzed the project's temporary construction-related impacts, long-term operational impacts, and cumulative impacts. Only impacts that exceeded the thresholds of significance are considered potentially significant and would require mitigation measures to reduce the impacts to less than significant levels. The topics that are analyzed include air quality, cultural resources, which includes historic and archaeological resources, energy, geology and soils, specifically for paleontological resources, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards and hazardous materials, land use and planning, noise, population and housing, public services, so that includes fire and police protection services, transportation, and tribal cultural resources. As previously said, this is a list of environmental topics that are addressed within the initial study, and during that process, these topics were determined to have no impacts or less than significant impacts due to the implementation of the project. Therefore, these topics are not carried forward for further analysis in the draft EIR. So these topics include aesthetics, agriculture and forestry resources, biological resources, geology and soils, which excludes paleontological resources, hydrology and water quality, mineral resources, public services, including schools and parks, recreation, utilities and service systems, which includes wastewater, water supply, solid waste, and telecommunications, and wildfire. And further explanation for these topics is provided in the initial study, which is provided as an appendix to the draft EIR. So this is a list of the environmental topics that were analyzed in the draft EIR that were determined to have a less than significant impact on the environment and that therefore did not require implementation of mitigation measures. With regard to air quality, the draft EIR found that project operation would not exceed federal or state ambient air quality standards or applicable significance thresholds, and therefore operational impacts on air quality would be less than significant. In regard to historical resources, a cultural resources assessment report was conducted to determine if existing buildings on site qualified as historical resources under CEQA, and it was determined in the report that the buildings do not qualify as historic resources, and therefore their demolition would not have an impact on historical resources. In regard to energy, the draft EIR determined that project construction and operation would not result in potentially significant environmental impacts due to wasteful, inefficient, or unnecessary consumption of energy resources. Additionally, the project would also not conflict with or obstruct state or local plans for renewable energy or energy efficiency. In regard to greenhouse gas emissions, the draft EIR determined that the project would not generate GHG emissions that would have a significant impact and that the project would not conflict with applicable plans, policies, or regulations adopted for the purpose of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In regard to hazards and hazardous materials, the city reviews the Phase 1, Phase 2 environmental site assessments and the vapor intrusion human health risk assessment prepared for the project. The reports determined that through compliance with applicable regulations, the project would not have a significant impact on hazards and hazardous materials. In regard to land use and planning, the draft EIR analyzed the potential impacts of the project with regard to consistency with the city's general plan, the bicycle and pedestrian action plan, the zoning code, the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG's regional transportation plan or sustainable community strategy, as well as the air quality management plan. The project, with approval of the comprehensive plan and the requested entitlements, would be in substantial conformance with applicable adopted plans, policies, guidance, and regulations adopted for the purpose of avoiding or mitigating an environmental effect. In regard to noise, the draft EIR found that project operation would not increase noise levels at noise-sensitive receptors in excess of the applicable thresholds, and therefore operational impacts on noise would be less than significant. In regard to population and housing, the draft EIR determined that the project would induce population growth through the provision of residential units and indirectly through the commercial uses proposed. However, the project would not induce substantial unplanned population growth as determined by SCAG's Regional Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. Impacts are found to be less than significant as the project's growth is not unplanned, but instead reflects the growth anticipated and supported by city and regional plans, particularly those focused on increasing housing and affordable housing. In regard to public services, while there would be an incremental increase in demand for police and fire services, the project would implement various features such as on-site security personnel and fire protection or prevention features to reduce the demand for police and fire services. Impacts would be less than significant as the project's demands would not require the expansion or construction of new facilities. Lastly, in regard to tribal cultural resources, the city conducted AB 52 consultation with California Native American tribes, and while no tribal cultural resources are anticipated to be affected by the project, the draft EIR includes mitigation measures for archaeological resources that include Native American construction monitoring and treatment of inadvertent prehistoric archaeological discoveries. So here's a list of the EIR topics that have significant impacts and would require mitigation. And as noted in the EIR, after the implementation of these mitigation measures, impacts for these topics are reduced to less than significant levels. So in regard to air quality, project construction would temporarily exceed applicable significance thresholds and would generate substantial short-term toxic air contaminants from diesel particulate matter that would exceed health risk thresholds. The temporary impacts associated with these construction emissions would be potentially significant. The project would implement mitigation measures to utilize cleaner construction equipment, implement fugitive dust emission practices, and limit on-road haul trucks to reduce the temporary construction impacts to less than significant levels. As previously stated, there would be no significant air quality impacts associated with the operation of the project. In regard to archaeological resources, although no known resources were identified within the project site, project construction activities could encounter buried archaeological resources. The project would implement mitigation measures to establish protections for archaeological resources and tribal cultural resources through monitoring should they be uncovered during construction. In regard to paleontological resources, project construction activities may directly or indirectly destroy unique paleontological resources or sites. The project would implement mitigation measures to protect these paleontological resources through identification, treatment, and preservation should they be discovered during construction. In regard to noise, construction activities would temporarily increase the noise levels at offsite noise-sensitive receptors in excess of the applicable thresholds. The project would implement mitigation measures to include a temporary construction fence and to utilize construction equipment with noise muffler systems to reduce the construction noise levels. With implementation of these mitigation measures, the impacts would be reduced to less than significant levels. And as previously stated, there would be no significant noise impacts associated with operation of the project. Lastly, in regard to traffic, the project would exceed the city's threshold for daily work vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, per employee for the office uses. The project would implement a transportation demand management or TDM program, which includes a commute marketing program and off-street parking pricing, which would reduce this impact from the office uses to a less than significant level. All other transportation impacts were found to be less than significant. And as noted in the notice of availability, the draft EIR is currently available for viewing at the following locations. You can always view it online at the city's website provided here and as part of the notice of availability. You can also view the draft EIR in person at Culver City's current planning division counter at City Hall, but please telephone in advance to make sure there is staff availability. And the draft EIR is also available at the Culver City Julian Dixon Library. And now I'll turn it back over to Michael. Michael, are you there? Looks like it's stuck on connecting to audio. All right, maybe just to keep things going, here's just kind of some information about how you can submit a public comment on the draft EIR. As we previously stated, the due date for the public comments is 5:30 p.m. on June 21st, 2021. Please reference the 11111 Jefferson Boulevard Mixed Use Project Draft EIR in your public comment. And you can direct your public comments to Michael Allen at the address here or at the email.
Hi, Jesse. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're working.
Okay. Thanks for taking them through the next part. But as Jesse just mentioned, and I think Kyle referenced it earlier, the document has been available since May and is available until June 21st. And there are several mechanisms to submit comment to that. We do encourage you to provide all written comments to the city before the close of business day, which is 5:30 on June 21st. And there will, in addition to this opportunity to participate publicly by submitting written comment, there are other opportunities. There are at least 3 more opportunities through formal public hearings, 1 before the Planning Commission and 2 before the City Council that will be noticed via email to those who have subscribed to the listservs, both with the project team and with the city, as well as a physical mailing similar to that of which that went out for this meeting tonight, as well as published on the city's website and published in the newspaper. And so all 3 of those meetings will be published, and you can participate and provide public comment during those opportunities when those meetings occur. And all of that noticing will happen at least 2 weeks or more in advance of those meetings coming up when they do get calendared. They are not currently calendared, but once they do, those notices will go out. We'll go ahead and open it up to the public for Q&A. And I'd like probably also, Jesse and I are not the only ones here on the call to answer questions. And so probably a good opportunity for the rest of the members of the team to introduce themselves from ESA as well as their peers. Tonight, we're going to be able to answer more generic or basic questions about the EIR and some of the work that was done to prepare the EIR, but the more technical, in-depth questions or questions that require a more technical, in-depth response will need to be handled through a more formal process, and we'll take note of those questions, and they'll be responded to in writing as part of the preparation of the final EIR, which both Eric made reference to and Jesse made reference to as well earlier. So with that, we'll go ahead and shift gears here to the Q&A, and there's instructions on the screen before you. And while people are preparing to answer their question or ask their questions, if we can get the other team members to introduce themselves, that would be great.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Ziff. I'm with ESA, the environmental consultant assisting the city. We are here to answer questions on the EIR, so glad to start the dialogue soon.
Hi, everybody, and my name is Tom Gall. I'm with Fair & Peers, transportation consultants, and we prepared the transportation analysis that's in the EIR.
And I am Ryan Liu, also with Fair and Peers, assisting with the transportation study for the EIR.
All right, and with that, we will go ahead with the questions that I see that are coming up in the chat box. So from Kimberly Ferguson, she asks, several of the EIR assessments which you state will have no impact, I believe will most definitely have significant impact and require mitigation and consideration. Those categories are air quality, geology and soil, noise, public utilities, and greenhouse gas. Also, what about earthquake concerns in the design and for emergency access and evacuation? What will be done about these? Jay, do you want to maybe take this one?
Sure. Yeah. Several of the categories that were indicated in this comment about, that they, I think the implication was that there weren't mitigation measures, yet, we do have mitigation for a number of these issues, with the exception of public utilities and greenhouse gas. So if you review those topics in the EIR, you'll be able to view what the mitigation is. And then also, just to clarify and make a general point, for each topic that's evaluated in the EIR, there are very specific thresholds of significance. And it's only when you exceed those thresholds and have a significant impact that mitigation measures are required, pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. So, an example of a threshold is for noise, where, there's certain noise levels where, if you're going to exceed those noise levels with construction or operation of the project, then you're required to have mitigation to reduce those impacts. So, noise is one of the topics where we've got significant impacts during construction. And as Jesse mentioned previously, the mitigation includes sound walls and other things about the construction equipment that have been evaluated. And once you look at what the sound walls will do to reduce noise levels, and the equipment, treatment on the site, those noise levels are reduced below the threshold and are considered, impacts are considered reduced to a less than significant level. So that's a general approach to, to addressing the topics in the EIR. And I should also state that for certain topics like, geology and soils, there are quite a few regulations that require the project to, to take steps in order to ensure that there aren't impacts on the environment. And those regulations are also laid out in each of the sections of the EIR, for each separate topic. So, that should also help answer some of the questions here from Kimberly Ferguson.
Great. So from Arthur, says, according to page 55 of the transportation section, 5 intersections will have significant traffic queuing impacts. That confirms the intuitive opinions of many citizens. No mitigations, quote, corrective measures are proposed. Does that mean that the severe congestion will just have to be accepted?
I think I'll take that question. Hi, Tom Gall with Fair and Peers. Arthur, appreciate the question. When we did the analysis, and by the way, let me just preface this by saying this is absolutely an important analysis that we did, but it's actually it's not a CEQA impact that we're talking about here. The CEQA impacts for transportation are about, these days, given changes in state law, about VMT, but having vehicle, which is vehicle miles of travel. But in any event, this is still an operational analysis that's important to the city and to the residents and everybody who uses these streets. We did investigate the potential for corrective measures at the intersections that the project would be adding traffic to. In many cases, there was not an easy answer to be found within existing rights of way. There is, or we also found that some things we could potentially propose might be in conflict with potential city plans on how Sepulveda may be used in the future. So that's still subject to further conversation that we're having with city staff right now as to whether there are some additional things that we could potentially suggest, but don't have an answer to that right now.
Thanks, Tom. From Michael, will the park be private or be ran through Culver City Parks and Recs Department? Not sure if it would be a safe place for children to play. Will the park have a Parks and Rec employee on duty during park hours?
As far as I know, the park was going to be owned and operated, or the open space is going to be owned and operated by the development owner themselves. And so this is not a public park per se. And unless something changes, and somebody on the project team can shoot me a message if that's changed. But last I knew, this is it's open to the public, but it's a private park or private open space.
That's correct. And then as it relates to safety, that is addressed as part of the EIR, there will not be a Parks and Rec employee on duty during the park hours, as it's not going to be a part of the Parks and Rec department. So next question from Kimberly, can this presentation be downloaded into the chat so that we can download it? Michael, I believe that this presentation will be provided online on the city's website. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can upload the entire video tonight, as well as the meeting notes once they're summarized and annotated to the city's website along the project link that anybody can access.
Great. Question from John. Was a revised traffic study done when the programming was more complete? It is a question for Tom.
The study was done for the project as it's currently proposed, and as was discussed earlier tonight when Jesse discussed the parameters of the project. So I'm not sure that I understand the question about programming being more complete. We studied the project as it's currently proposed.
Great. Then from an anonymous attendee, was this study conducted during the pandemic when the community was confined to their homes?
I'm assuming that's maybe more asking about the traffic counts that were in support of the study. The study itself has been going on for obviously quite a while, but the traffic counts were conducted prior to the pandemic. They were conducted in both the spring and fall of 2019 before the pandemic.
Right. From Dr. Tom Williams, have the Overland and Charnock faults been reviewed and assessed? So as part of the geology and soil section, and there is a more in-depth preliminary geotech report that was included as part of the initial study and which is available on the city's website. We will take this, this comment into account and we will address it as part of the final EIR. A comment from Brian. How is it possible that adding 230 units with people going to work in the morning and coming home at night will not have significant negative impact on the traffic problems that already exist, certainly pre-COVID on Sepulveda and Sawtell? Tom, for you.
The traffic study did assess the potential effects of the project, including the 230 units on the traffic in the area. And as has already been mentioned in a prior comment, we did find that there would be some impacts of that on the traffic. So we're not suggesting in the traffic study that there is not an effect.
Right, from Marcel, why does the EIR state that there will be no traffic impact? The current situation is terrible, especially at Sepulveda and Jefferson. How will the increase in traffic be managed? Are there specific mitigation plans?
Yeah, okay, this is Tom again. It's a question of semantics here, all right? There's the environmental impact analysis that is done per state law, per the CEQA, what's called the California Environmental Quality Act requirements, and the state, has set forth certain standards for what we need to look at for that. There's also what I already referred to earlier as the operational analysis that we've done of the actual traffic effects at the intersections in the area. A number of years back, the state changed their procedures such that intersection impacts are no longer considered to be significant impacts under CEQA. Significant impacts under CEQA have to do with how much vehicle miles of travel is generated by the project. So that's a calculation not just of how many trips are generated, but also how far they travel. So you're looking at the entirety of the length of that impact along the street system. And there are certain criteria that the city has set up based on state guidance as to how to measure whether or not a project has a significant VMT impact. So when the EIR says there's no impact for traffic, it's referring to the VMT impact. And I should also say that there was a significant impact found in regards to office generated VMT. The no impact finding is only after mitigation, because we did suggest in the EIR that certain transportation demand management measures would be implemented in order to reduce that the office impact on VMT to below significance. So in terms of the word impact, that's why the EIR says there's no residual or remaining significant impact after mitigation. That's as distinct from the traffic operations at the intersections, which are a non-sequel finding, but still an important analysis that we did do in response to the city's concerns and the neighbors' concerns.
Great, thank you. And then a question from Vicki Foxworth: when will construction start and how long will it take? So as part of the draft EIR, we are anticipating that project construction would commence as early as the second quarter of 2022 and would be completed by the third quarter of 2024. So for an anticipated duration of 26 months. A question from Robin Turner: since the city is considering getting rid of single-family zoning to allow for more denser housing, why don't you take out the housing on this project and make it a 2-story retail project instead? That way the project won't be that damaging to the existing residential area, and it will benefit the people in Culver City and give another option for development. So thank you, Robin, for this comment. We will address this as part of the final EIR. So a question from Brian: how can adding a 5-floor structure in the middle of an area of 1 to 2 stories not have a significant negative aesthetic impact, changing the community that we all chose to live in? Jay?
Yeah, this is one of the issues that Jesse had gone over that was addressed in the initial study. So there was an assessment of the potential for there to be impacts on aesthetics, but the initial study, which is included as an appendix to the EIR, indicated that the thresholds that the city uses and the questions that are posed by the California Environmental Quality Act to determine whether an impact is significant, that the project wouldn't exceed those thresholds. They focus for aesthetics really for an urban project like this on 2 questions: whether the project would obstruct or significantly degrade scenic views, or whether it would conflict with zoning or other regulations that are focused on visual resources. So, for both of those issues, this isn't a project site that that supports scenic views. So although the scale, there is a contrast with some surrounding development in terms of the height of the structure, it's not in an area where important scenic views or protected views would be obstructed. Therefore, that impact was determined less than significant in the initial study. And then also in assessing consistency with with city plans and regulations that are focused on scenic resources, the project didn't conflict with those plans and regulations in a way that suggested there would be a significant impact. But this is one of those questions that we will answer in more detail in the final EIR, but that's just a quick overview.
Kimberly Ferguson asks, my concern is after the final completed project as well, and this building and its residents will affect and impact on the peaceful enjoyment of residents and those traveling through this area. I believe this comment was already previously addressed as it relates to some of the impact areas that you had asked if they would require mitigation and consideration. So we will also take that into account as part of the final EIR in the responses to comments.
Yeah, and Jesse, I would also add that, for those environmental topics where we've found that there would be significant impacts and where the EIR includes mitigation measures. There is a requirement for the city to, to monitor implementation of those mitigation measures and make sure that they achieve their desired results. So, so there will be some ongoing follow-up, for significant impacts to ensure that that the mitigation is adequately implemented.
That's correct. All right. Question from Katie. The current site layout along Machado is unsafe. It also unfairly pushes all queuing traffic to Machado. Which party, the developer or the city, is responsible for a safe Machado Road layout, including traffic media configuration, etc.? The current layout invites a head-to-head collision at the midpoint of residential entrance and Heritage Park entrance.
Hi, Katie. Thanks for your question. So both parties would be responsible for a safe Machado Road working together. And the current layout with the driveways at the Heritage Park entrance were tested and found that a head-on-head collision would not be present for both left turns into Heritage Park or the residential entrance.
Right. A question from Mie. Currently, there are signals at 1 Sepulveda and Machado and 2 Sepulveda and Jefferson. It is a very short block, and we are adding one more signal in the mid-block at Janison. Signal coordination will be critical for the traffic flow. Was there a study for alternatives for not having signal at Janison and improved pedestrian crossing and traffic timing at the 2 existing intersections above? Tom or Ryan?
Certainly, I'll take that. We absolutely agree that signal coordination is critical for the traffic flow. We've been looking at that, and that is something that would be a condition that the city would place on the project to do as part of installing that new signal. Not just coordination, but all the work that would be required to connect that signal to the city's control system, as well as adding, proper monitoring cameras, things like that. So it's absolutely, we agree that signal coordination is critical. In terms of study of alternatives for not having it, but improving pedestrian crossing and simultaneous 2 existing intersections, that was not studied in the traffic study, but we could certainly take a look or consider that comment as we go forward in response to comments.
Great. Comment from Katie. There is a narrow R1 zoning along Machado curb at the northmost parcel. What's the justification to convert R1 zoning to general commercial use? Jay or Michael, I don't know if this one will be more appropriate for you.
Yeah, I can address that. The narrow strip of R1 zoning is actually currently used as a parking lot for ECF, and so this project incorporates that narrow parcel, and so rezoning it would make it consistent with the actual use and the proposed use of the project site in total. So it's essentially a cleanup zone text or zone code map amendment because it'll reflect the current and future use of that parcel.
Great. Next question from an anonymous attendee. Is your project already set in stone, or can the residents still refuse the development? So I'm going to go back to this flow chart. So as you can see, this project is not set in stone yet. The city will still have to prepare a final EIR that will include the draft EIR, as well as the responses to the comments that we're receiving tonight and throughout towards the end of the comment period. And after the final EIR is published, there will still be public hearings, which will be another opportunity for public input. At that point, the city decision makers will consider the information provided in the EIR and whether to certify the project. So there is still time and availability for public input, and the residents and the community and the public are still able to submit their comments about the project. Michael, I don't know if you want to add anything else to the response as well.
No, I think you covered it, Justin.
Great. All right, question from Wendy. Has the impact of additional residents on Culver City School District resources and capacity been studied? In response, yes, that has been studied. It was analyzed as part of the initial study under the public services. We did do an analysis of the schools, and we did correspond and coordinate with the Culver City School District as well. So that information is provided within the initial study, and the analysis in there found that the project would have a less than significant impact on schools.
Yeah, and just to further, answer the question, one of the primary reasons that the impacts on public schools were not considered significant is that the project will be required to pay mitigation fees, and payment of those fees, by the project will essentially effectively mitigate the impacts of the project in accordance with state law. And then similarly for parks also, when you've got a project with residential uses, there are regulations that require, contributions, either fees or facilities to offset that project's, additional demand on park facilities. So, there's more detail in the initial study, and we can provide a more fuller response to the comment and the final EIR, but prior to the close of the comment period, if you look at the appendix to the EIR with the initial study, you'll see headings for the topics, parks and schools, where you can see what the justification was for, those impacts not being significant, and essentially why they weren't carried forward for further analysis.
And a question from Kimberly. If this project was providing more low-income and affordable housing along with the other amenities, it would resolve a big Culver City housing issue. Can we not demand that this be increased and make them now take advantage of AB 2345 to help pay for this additional housing? I don't know if Jay or Michael, if you want to take this, but I believe that AB 2345 was addressed during the community meeting. However, we will take this comment into consideration, and we'll respond to it in further detail as part of the final EIR.
Yeah, and Jesse, I can expand a little bit. The project was, as the project team mentioned, they were not considering AB 2345 because at the time of the development of the project and when it was submitted to the city and vested, then AB 2345 was not actually in effect yet. And so they're taking advantage of SB 1818, which is the state legislation commonly referred to before AB 2345 existed, which allows up to a 35% density bonus. We can't necessarily force additional housing or affordable housing if they're simply providing it in compliance with state law. And a side note would be if they did choose to pursue AB 2345, which I don't think anybody is saying is necessarily a bad thing. More affordable housing is certainly a good thing, but that would also expand the potential density of the project. And so instead of a 35% density bonus, they would be eligible for a 50% density bonus. And so that 230 residential units could exponentially grow to more than 300 units because of what state law allows them to do in terms of density if they incorporate more affordable housing. And so I can certainly answer or provide more information offline when we have some more time to deliberate that particular topic.
Right, thanks for the clarification. And I believe, Kimberly, that does resolve your comments, but we will provide a response as part of the final EIR. Michelle asks, where will the school employees park? I believe the current parking lot will be taken away. So I believe this is in reference to the ECF parking spots. So as part of the project description in the draft EIR, we do state that the 34 spaces would be located within the subterranean parking level, and they would be identified as being fully dedicated to ECF. So they will be provided parking on the project site once the project is completed. At this time, I don't see any, oh, there we go. A question from Robin Turner. Jay, you are wrong about the development not impacting scenic views. It will destroy the current view line for the housing on the Culver crest, as well as with the housing that is currently around the project. The EIR seems not to have analyzed the project and surrounding areas in Culver City very well. All options should have been considered. How can you expand on all the potential options instead of just making minimal adjustments, the original project requirements only? I write EIR technical documents almost every day, and this EIR needs to be expanded on.
Thanks for your comment, Robin. And while I provided a general response to the question about aesthetics, in light of your comments here, we can provide a fuller explanation in response in the final EIR. So we appreciate you voicing your concerns, and we will elaborate as we prepare the final EIR. Thanks.
Then a comment from Katie. Mr. Liu, you did not provide any supporting statements except saying no safety issue at the midpoint of Heritage Park and residential entrance. You did not answer the queuing traffic is unfairly paused to Machado either.
So in the transportation study, queuing was investigated at all project driveways, and we did not find significant queuing issues at the project driveways along Machado Road.
And if I could add that it's not, there's project access via Sepulveda at the Janison signal that's proposed as well. So it's not only Machado that has project access proposed. In regards to the midpoint of Heritage Park and residential entrance, it's just that it's hard to see it on the scale of the project site plan, but the left turns that appear to be opposing each other at Heritage Park and the residential entrance on Machado can in fact turn past each other without impacting each other. So that it's not a suicide lane situation, which was a comment that was made earlier.
Great, thanks. At this time, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the Q&A box. But like we said, please provide your comments to the city prior to the close of the public comment period so that they will be responded to in more detail as part of the final EIR. I think we'll probably stick around until 8 o'clock in case anyone has any further questions or comments.
And Jesse, can you put the slide back up that reminds people how they can submit comments and tell what they think?
There's a question from Kimberly asking, do you know what the square footage of the housing will be? I think that's maybe a question more for the applicant and the development team if you're asking about how big each of the units will be. So please direct that question to the email that Kyle had provided in the prior email, and he should be able to get back to you.
Yeah, although the EIR project description, if you're talking about the square footage of residential units, it's 244,609 square feet.
I'm seeing from Kimberly
that comprises the 230 units.
See, I believe there was an earlier question about the construction start and construction duration. I don't believe that.
We did address that. So that'll be in the third quarter, I believe, for a total of 26 months. So we did answer that question. All right. See some more questions coming up. We've got a question from anonymous attendee. My understanding is that parking is free for the retail customers for this project, but it is not free for the retail staff. Is there something being done to prevent staff from parking in the surrounding residential area?
So you are correct that parking will be free for retail customers, and it will also be free for retail staff.
Right. And then a question from Bonnie. If I remember correctly, the initial traffic analysis rated the area with a D rating. Will the rating improve after the mitigation measures? Tom, go ahead.
Well, in fact, there are some that are at D in terms of intersection ratings. There were some that were at E as well. No, they will not improve after the mitigation measures. The project traffic that's being added does, in the operational analysis that we conducted, we concluded that at certain locations it does add to the congestion at those intersections. And as was previously discussed in a prior response, we were not able to always find corrective actions at those locations. What the project is doing is implementing a whole suite of transportation demand management measures beyond what's required just as CEQA mitigation to reduce the project's traffic to the greatest extent possible.
Great, thanks. A question from Carolyn. Why do we need more office space and retail when so much of this is already vacant due to online shopping and those working from home? So thank you for the comment, and we will address it in more detail as part of the final EIR. A question from Kathy. Will parking meters be put in on Sepulveda?
No parking meters are proposed on Sepulveda Boulevard.
A question from Vicky. What hours will construction be allowed? So as part of the project description in the draft EIR, it does say that the project will comply with the Culver City Municipal Code, section 9.07.035's allowable construction hours. So it'll be Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. through 8 p.m., Saturdays from 9 a.m. through 7 p.m., and Sundays from 10 a.m. through 7 p.m.
Yeah, and Jesse, if I could also add, there were a number of comments, in the community meeting and, concerns about effects of the project during construction and, comments about, the construction management plan. And while a final construction management plan has not been completed yet, there is, if you look in the project description of the EIR, there's a very comprehensive kind of outline and framework of what the content of that construction management plan will include, and a lot of its key provisions. So it's too much in the way of specifics to go into here. But please look at the project description, at the project design features, and you'll see a pretty comprehensive outline of the construction management plan if you've got concerns regarding construction.
Thanks. And Kathy, I see that you asked to repeat those hours. So this is in the project description, you'll find it on page 25, but it is Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. through 8 p.m., Saturdays from 9 a.m. through 7 p.m., and then Sundays from 10 a.m. through 7 p.m. Right, and then a question from Katie. Can fire trucks enter or exit the Machado retail entrance? Tom or Ryan, I don't know if you want to address that one. But I do know that the draft EIR, it does analyze emergency access in a couple of different areas. So we can answer your question in more detail as well as part of the final EIR. And then a question from Arthur. The mitigation for office traffic includes charging for on-site employee parking. What will keep the office employees from parking on Janisan or in the shopping center to avoid the fees?
So the condition for the project is going to be that the entire transportation demand management program will be written as a condition of approval for the project, and that will include monitoring mechanisms as well to enforce the requirements that are in the transportation demand management program. So the monitoring of the office employees will be part of that monitoring program to be developed as part of the project's TDM program.
Right. And then from an anonymous attendee, not sure if this is an EIR topic, but currently Verizon cellular signal is very poor in the area. With the additional demand from this project, is there something being done to strengthen the signal? Unfortunately, this is not within the scope of the questions that are required under CEQA, so I'm not sure that we have an answer for this at this time. We have a follow-up question from Kimberly. Can we not have 1 day of rest from construction to eliminate traffic congestion on Sunday, or say no exterior construction at least on Sundays? So I think this is probably one of the comments that we'll address as part of the final EIR, but it should be noted that the project construction will comply with the Culver City Municipal Code at this time. A question from Katie. For the northernmost parcel R1 zone, city could regulate to make sure the current use R1 zone is enforced. Why does city choose to go the other way without further justification? Michael, I believe you had addressed this a little bit before, so if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to elaborate on. Other than the current general plan designation is inconsistent with the zoning designation, and the city's general plan is intended to guide the overall development of the project site. And so this actually brings the zoning in conformance with the general plan designation. And I actually, off the top of my head, I don't even know if that site is big enough to feasibly develop a single family home given the dimensions of the parcel, but that's just anecdotal. But the reality is that this project will actually bring that parcel into conformance with the existing general plan designation, which is what we're intended to follow.
Great. And finally, last
hey,
question. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back quickly to the question about construction hours. As I've mentioned before, there's a pretty comprehensive outline of the construction management plan and what it will include in the EIR project description. And among the things that the construction management plan includes in the way of requirements is that prior to final approval of the final construction management plan, the applicant will conduct a community meeting, pursuant to the city's notification requirements. And among the things that will be discussed at the community meeting will be, various aspects of construction, including, the schedule and hours for construction and traffic diversion plans to the extent that those apply, as well as the location of construction, parking, and truck haul routes, things along those lines. So there will be additional opportunities if the project is approved, prior to final approval of the construction management plan for the local residents to ask questions and have their concerns heard.
Great. Thanks, Jay. So at this time, it is 8:01, and so I think we are reaching the end of the meeting. So I'll kind of turn it over to Michael to wrap up the evening.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Jay, and the rest of the project team. And as well as the development team who presented for the first hour and answered all those questions. There's several, there's several questions that remain. And Jesse, I think there was another slide that also had the contact information for questions about the project, as well as the draft EIR. Yeah, that slide. So again, just as a reminder, draft EIR questions or comments can come in multiple forms. You can mail it to, hard mail, USPS or FedEx or UPS to myself at City Hall at the current planning division, or you can email me the direct question. Additionally, if you have project related questions that are unrelated to the environmental components of the project, you can email them at the bottom right hand corner. There's the email for the 11111 Jefferson at 3mrcapital.com team. And with that, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few more opportunities for public participation, a few more formal opportunities. I know that the project team mentioned they are more than happy to continue the informal, unrequired meetings, but there will be 3 more formal meetings, and noticing will go out for that as well. And the decision will end up being made by the Planning Commission, who will make a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will hear the project 2 times. So there'll be 2 opportunities before City Council, who will end up voting on this project. With that, I'd like to wish everybody a great evening, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.